This is the Classic Auto Mall Show. Broadcast from the studios inside the Classic Auto Mall in Morgantown, Pennsylvania. Just 1 hour west of Philadelphia at Pennsylvania Turnpike exit 298. Featuring nearly 1,000 classic, vintage, and barn-find vehicles for sale under one climate-controlled roof. Now, here's your host, Classic Auto Mall president and the man with all the toys, Stewart Howden.
And we're I'm ready.
Soft finger there.
You have to do that. You just kind of pointed at me, and it was like doing that thing where the kids do these days. Welcome to the show, number 176.
Welcome.
Yeah,
Hi,
welcome.
everybody.
How you doing? Good to see you. Good to have you back. Is it cold out there?
It's brutal.
What is today? November the what? What is the day that we're recording this? 15th?
15th January. That'd be January. It feels like November.
Yes, it does feel like November. So January the 15th, 2025, we're recording this. I think it was 9 degrees this morning.
Yeah.
And next week's not going to get much better. So, JR, we're going to have to change our promo because now we have more than 1,000 cars. I just gave it away. So how many cars in inventory, JR, this week?
Oh, more than 1,000.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go with just a little lower because I think we sold some. So I'm going to say 1,022.
Oh, boy.
1049.
1075.
Wow.
So, you know,
Right on.
It's actually held pretty steady. I think we had 1077 or something last week. Was it last week we did the show? Yeah,
yes,
with Hurley Haywood. That's right.
That's right.
It was 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago that we didn't have a show. So welcome to show number 176, as I said, and welcome our special guest, Lowell Paddock, who's joining us from, I'm assuming, Connecticut this morning?
Yes, New Preston, Connecticut, about half an hour south of Limerock.
Lowell is an automotive aficionado like the rest of us since childbirth, and is also done lots of things automotive, including running concours and executive editors and publisher. And gosh, what haven't you done in the car world?
I really haven't restored a car from start to finish, which is something I'd like to do. Okay. So I've got the space, and I'm eyeing a Fiat 1500 that I've often, Pininfarina bodied Fiat 1500 that I know of, that is in just good enough condition to not get me into too much trouble.
Sure. Well, you'd think you'd want to start with something fairly easy for your first one. You wouldn't want to go something too complicated, I wouldn't think. There's a lot of complicated cars, even early cars that are out there. It's funny that you look at some of the engine compartments of Packards and Duesenbergs, and you think, wow, that was fairly complex and fairly full of stuff. In that engine compartment that you didn't see from some of the manufacturers in the 50s and 60s where they had lots of extra room.
Well, I think anybody who's an enthusiast really needs to have a pre-war, and that this applies to differently than the Fiat, but needs to have a pre-war car at one point. I was leaving Hershey 2 years ago, and there was a 1933-34 Packard Roadster in somewhat better than barn fine condition leaving, and I handed the guy my card and said, if you ever want to sell it, let me know.
Sure.
And he actually did reach out to me. At that time, I had bought something else and couldn't do it, but as a friend of mine said, you have to be ready that, you're used to hopping into everything you have in the garage and driving it away. And when you have a pre-war car, especially one as noble as a Packard, driving down to the corner store for ice cream is not quite as simple a task as you might think.
Sure. Well, I think that a lot of us realize that having multiple cars can be, this sounds like boohoo for you, but it's all, but it's true. I mean, you get in your car. How many times does it happen to you? You get in, where are my sunglasses? Where's the garage door opener? Where's the remote? Where's the Easy Pass? Where's the cord for the phone? It's just a litany of things. You think, I think I'm just going to get down to one car. I think
that assumes that it starts.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And realize that you're not going anywhere. That's really disappointing.
My old business partner that I had about 10 or 12 years ago, we said, all right, we're going to start driving the cars. Every weekend, we're going to pick a different car. So the first weekend we do it, we go to the shed, and the car that's blocking everything else in has got a dead battery. We charge it, we get it going, we get it started, won't go into gear, needs, it's like, oh, forget it. This is a great idea until it wasn't, right?
Exactly.
So, former executive General Motors. I mean, you've done a lot of things in your career as in the automotive world, and that's got to be a dream come true. I mean, to be publishing books and writing for Sports Car Market magazine and running concours. I mean, that's got to be kind of a dream gig, right?
Well, yeah, it was. I mean, as I mentioned to you when we talked I got sort of, I guess, a little bit bored of being an automotive journalist and made the switch to go into working for a manufacturer. And I was fortunate that I was able to go to a lot of different places with GM, primarily in Asia, but also in Germany. And I worked for Opel, which is a brand that I really respected and appreciated really since I was a kid. And it was a great team. The Germans, especially at Opel, they're extremely car focused, and they're all enthusiasts. And so I went last year to the Essen Motor Show in Germany, which is well worth a visit.
Sure.
With a bunch of my old Opel friends who are still doing those types of shows. So, you know, what always intrigued me about the car business is the sort of the start to finish of how do you go from an idea or multiple ideas to something that rolls off the assembly line. And to have done that multiple times with multiple programs is really exciting. And you see the things that work, and you see also the mistakes you make. And you know, it's a business where you really can't, you're playing often with, you know, 250, 500, 750 million, even more. You really can't afford to make a bad move, because once you do, it's, you know, 6 years or longer before you can fix it.
Right. Well, and you said something that's curious that you don't hear a lot talking about executives in manufacturing, is they were car enthusiasts, and you don't always hear that from the executive side of manufacturers.
Yeah, but I would say, I guess my experience was a bit different at GM. I would say that while there certainly were people that were, you know, you have to run a business, and there are people focused on running the business and saying, you know, you can't afford that door handle, or we have to do something cheaper. But there were also people, and I would put Mark Royce at the top of the heap, who's currently the president of GM, is, you know, a serious car enthusiast. And we had Mark at Limerock 3 years ago for the Corvette year, when we had 14 cars from the GM Heritage Collection. And I can tell you, Mark was just like a kid in a candy store. We had the one of the Grand Sports from the Revs Institute there, and I had to practically drag him away. You know, he grew up in the business with his father, and I would say that attitude is really very common amongst the senior leaders at GM. But again, it's a business, so you've got to make difficult decisions and decide to do or what not to do. Well,
engineering and design and all that. But didn't Mark just set a speed record somewhere at Nürburgring or something like that? Yes,
exactly. And you know, Mark has raced at various venues, and you know, he's quite serious about what he does, and I think he brings that enthusiasm. I think a lot of what's going on with Cadillac and the resuscitation of Cadillac is really down to Mark and his team, and of course the design team as well, you know, saying this is a priority for us. We've got to get this right. We can't just be an also-ran.
Well, as you and I talked about the other day, there's not many cars being manufactured that are U.S.-based manufacturers. I mean, Toyota still has a lot of cars, and BMW and Mercedes have lots of cars. Cadillac has cars. I mean, does Chevrolet, the only car they have now is a Corvette, right? Is that the only?
I think it depends, Stewart, on how you define a car. I think the market has moved to what I would call crossovers, which, you know, basically are, you know, high roof hatchbacks. Right. A Chevy Trax is really, you know, not an SUV. It has SUV pretensions, you know, in terms of a rise, you know, a higher riding height and higher seating point, but it's not a body on frame SUV. It's really sort of a high roof hatch, and as a result, very efficient on fuel economy. And I think that's what the public has told the manufacturers, is that they're really not, you know, they like the visibility, they like the feeling of being able to drive in all four seasons, and I think that's what the manufacturers respond to is to what individual tastes are.
Well, sure. Obviously, they're not going to build cars that we don't want, or they're going to try not to build cars that way. I mean, my wife prefers to sit high. She likes to be higher up than an automobile does, and so I get that. You know, talking about the Heritage Collection, which is a wonderful collection. What's going on with that? Is it closed now, or is it still viable, or what?
No, it's been. I'm not 100% certain, but it has been moved to a different location. And I think they will be reopening it soon. It's not I don't believe it's generally open to the public, but you can certainly make an appointment to visit it. And I have to say, I can't tell you how impressed I was with the crew that brought those cars. I mean, if I take the Stingray SS, which is probably the crown jewel or one of the crown jewels of the collection, you know, they only take 3 or 4 cars in one truck at a time because of the value of those cars, and they're all climate controlled. So what you don't want to have is, I think it's less of a case with a fiberglass bodied car, but a metal bodied car. It gets loaded in a 70-degree garage and then unloaded on a 32-degree day. And guess what? The paint starts to pop off. Yeah. So, but these, we had the Mako Shark didn't have a voltage, or the voltage regulator wasn't working. So the guy said, great, I'll go down to Napa and I'll just fabricate one. So half an hour later shows up, puts the wine, and we drove all the cars. We drove all the cars during the event. And I think, to keep those, number one, to keep them in the collection. Number two, to keep them in good condition. Number three, keep them running. Number four, share them at multiple places is a real tribute to how they feel about their history.
Because so many cars were not saved over the years. I mean, lucky for guys like Joe Bortz, who saved a lot of the concept cars when they were supposed to go right and they went left, and the crusher was to the right and left was the guy's garage. Thank God that happened, because a lot of the manufacturers didn't embrace their heritage until it was almost too late. That was a shame.
No, that's true with Ford, that they have much lower access to their cars than I think GM or Chrysler do. Chrysler, certainly, we had Chrysler at one of the events, and they brought the turbine car, which they keep running, and they have a guy in their staff whose job is just to keep the turbine car running. And, I don't know if you've ever been around one of those cars, but when it starts up and everyone looks up in the sky going, what is this? And it's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Well, I was at Chattanooga. I've been in Chattanooga a lot of years, but 3 or 4 years ago, they had some of the heritage cars down there, and they had the Firebirds that looked like airplanes. And what was encouraging and exciting to me was watching the kids' reaction to those cars. Those cars were like magnets to the kids. They went right towards those. And that's what we're trying to achieve here, is to continue the hobby and continue the passion for cars, right?
Yeah, and keeping them running. I mean, those are all, they're all standalone technologies. So they require really true subject matter experts to keep them running. And, the parts were all one-off parts when they were built in the 50s, and anything that has to be replaced, unless you go to Napa to get a voltage regulator, basically has to be fabricated.
Sure.
You keep it going.
Does do you see that the market will continue towards whatever direction it's going? I mean, the hybrids, the electric cars, the all electrics, and then the internal combustion engines. I mean, it was funny. I was looking at a GMC Denali on a lot the other day, and it was a 2024 top of the line, and it had 3.0 liter V6. And at first I went, oh, well, I wouldn't want one with a 3-liter V6. And then I thought, well, maybe if I drove it, I would have a different opinion. And I think, but seeing the direction that these cars are going with smaller engines and more efficient engines and the hybrid, is the hybrid version make more sense to you than all electric, or what are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting. When I was at GM, there was a chart that showed the cost of a battery propulsion unit versus internal combustion. Of course, in all fairness, this was looking at going to probably more aggressive fuel standards than we'll have under the Trump administration. But those lines crossed. And I think that's, GM has said, I don't know if they're still saying that, but saying that basically they'll be variable profit positive on EVs. And a lot of that is driven by volume. And we're like, this is like the semiconductor business. There's sort of a Moore's law effect that things get cheaper with more volume and more innovation. And I think that the 7,500 credit has certainly been a stimulus to people buying EVs, and that's going to almost certainly go away in January 20th.
Sure.
But I think there's momentum behind the EV market. And so I think there will be continued growth in full electric vehicles as they get more efficient. And I think I told you I'm driving an Equinox EV right now, 300 more or less miles of range. I love it. It's great. I can charge it at home. Would I want to drive it to Detroit? The non-Tesla network is still shaky. And so I think until that gets built out and then the range goes up to 400, which is the next big thing. If you get a Tesla now, I think 385 range. So at a certain point, it's going to be like when laptops like the Apple computers we have now that have 14 hours of battery life. You don't think about it anymore. So,
or 5 megabytes was the hard drive size on the first laptop that I got. So,
but the dilemma for the OEMs is that if you have a hybrid, you're especially a plug-in hybrid, you're paying for 2 propulsion systems. You've got 2 parallel systems, which adds to the cost. So I think there's going to continue to be this sort of debate going on in the public. I have a lot of friends asking me about plug-in hybrids. And these days they have a range of 30 to 40 miles, which is probably good enough for most people.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, if I look at things in an honest opinion of myself, I'm a perfect candidate. I drive, our bank and everything is 2 miles from here. We don't ever go more than 2 or 3 miles in a day. I mean, it would be make perfect sense if it made perfect sense all the way around. Is it more efficient? Is it better for our environment? Internal combustion engine versus, a hybrid or a hybrid version or an all electric. I mean, I know that I could put a brand new Corvette in my office and turn it on and run it, and you wouldn't be smoked out within, like 2 minutes. So you could be on any car from the 50s, 60s, or 70s.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that there's still enthusiasts like us who want that feeling of,
right.
Much as I enjoy the seamless acceleration of the Equinox, I love my 993 and
exactly
up the roads around here, and I love the sound that it makes.
Sure,
and you can't fake that.
Yeah. The soundtrack won't cut it. I love what Jay Leno said, don't ask us about electric vehicles. We're car enthusiasts. I mean, of course, there's certain reasons that we're going to say that we don't care for them. But is it true, you look at all these cars and the argument that people make nowadays is, well, all cars look the same, which is not entirely true. There's a lot of, I think you see that. But isn't it because basically everybody's trying to achieve the same goal, the same fuel efficiency, and they have to get the coefficient of drag and all the different things that they have to do. So they kind of invariably look alike.
Yeah, definitely aerodynamics are, as a contributor to fuel efficiency, is driving some of that. What I've had a conversation with Ed Welburn about, who is the former design director at GM,
sure.
is why aren't more electric car manufacturers taking advantage of the fact that you don't have these traditional connections? You don't have an engine with axles and a steering column going into the motor compartment. You can move all that stuff around now. I mean, and you can even have drive-by-wire, which I think the Cybertruck has.
Right.
So you don't have a traditional steering column. So these components that were all sort of forced to be in one location don't have to be in that location anymore, which would allow you to do all sorts of interesting things with car proportions.
Right.
Like, you don't have this front-wheel drive engine driving the long overhang that lots of front-wheel drive cars have. And so I just don't know why there hasn't been more innovation like that.
Sure.
To take advantage of this flexibility, which would, I think, maybe not get around entirely the aerodynamic issue, but would allow you to fundamentally change car proportions and create a new look. So maybe that's the next big thing. Well,
and maybe the cars that we used to see as concepts that were impractical because of whatever reason now could be practical. You could have the goofy steering wheel that had the yoke and the weird things that we used to see, because I never thought about it that way. That's interesting that you could do it differently. And then don't you know, all the guys that manufacture things like power steering units and all that are going, oh crap, if we're not already out of business, it's not far behind, right?
Well, I think making these are long-term bets. These are bets that are made a decade in advance. And obviously they're dependent on consumer tastes, legislation, competitor trends, whatever. And, you've only got so many chips to play, and you've got to make sure you play them in the right place. And so I think, electric cars, I think the issue that I see in the trade press, but not so much in the public press, is what's going to happen to dealers. I mean, I have a 2-year lease on my Equinox. I mean, I'm not going to need new tires. I'm not going to need an oil change. I'm not going to need, any maintenance.
Right.
So what happens to the dealer then? Do they shrink down? Do they?
Well, their profit, their profit centers are mostly in service and finance now, right?
Exactly.
So, interesting to see. I mean, a standalone dealership that has no other rooftops is in trouble. I mean, they've been in trouble for a long time. Yeah. But what are you going to do about it? I didn't mean this to become the all electric show, but one last question. So why can't we invent, this will be like a kid asking his teacher a stupid question. Why can't we invent some kind of friction thing where when we're rolling down the highway, it's charging the batteries?
Well, that would mean you would have no energy to drive the car, but almost all the EVs have regenerative braking. Now, it won't recharge the battery, but it definitely provides an incremental element of charging.
Sure.
So, I think you're seeing what I'm so impressed in the electric car business is this multi-front battle on efficiency. That's battery storage, It's control technology.
Right.
There's probably as many software engineers working on an EV as there are mechanical engineers.
Right.
And developing this ability to control the vehicle so that it gets maximum efficiency. You're seeing things going on with weight reduction, battery cost, battery size, and I think it's fascinating. And I mean, yes, as an enthusiast, I'm a little disturbed, I guess, or frustrated by the growth of, that the ICE is fading away. But
sure.
If you look on YouTube, there are plenty of kids who are going out and modifying Teslas to do just like we put two carbs on a car. I mean, they're it's just a different mentality.
Well, sure. And I think that, tinkering with cars isn't what it used to be when you come to stuff like that. But there's still, like you said, software, and that's what the kids love anyway, is dealing with computers and all that. So, I mean, I get it. It certainly seems interesting. I just hope that we have some version of ICE continuing until I'm long dead and gone.
Well, I think that I've certainly read, and maybe you have as well, that Chrysler is revisiting its decision to drop the Hemi. I've got to believe that those debates are happening in conference rooms everywhere. And it will depend a lot on what the new administration wants to prioritize, and that's probably not going to be fuel economy standards and rebates for EVs. So.
Sure. Well, we've got all this untapped oil, right? So we better use it, otherwise somebody else will get it. They'll figure out how to frack from here to Europe or whatever, vice versa, right? So, it's what's interesting to me is that the cars still have that kind of mystique to them. Owning a car, it's usually the second most expensive thing that a person buys. There's still that, individuality that we love to have. I mean, there's a lot of kids today who say, well, I just want a gray car, something that doesn't stand out, something that just gets me from point A to point B. But there's still enthusiasm for the cars. I mean, you see the Tesla Plaid, that thing performance-wise is as good as it gets, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at the Mustang, what's going on with the Mustang, the Black Horse, Dark Horse.
Yeah.
The GTD, all the different variants of the C8. So, not to mention all the European cars. There's still definitely enthusiasm out there. But I think all of us who are in the Concours world are trying to figure out how do we balance this drawing younger people in while still maintaining our core audience of maybe boomers and post-boomers. And I think it's a real challenge that all of these shows are facing is how to bridge that gap. Right. I'm sure there's some people at Concours that turn their nose up at, an entry-level car, or that we have a 20-year-old bringing his Maverick to the show. But, we have to give them a place as well. We have to make them feel welcome and reward their enthusiasm, even if it's in a form that we might think is a malaise car. Sure.
As long, I don't disagree with you. As long as we don't lose pre-war cars and things like that, as long as we don't completely make it Radwood instead of the Concours, because what we want to do is nurture them into the hobby. I talked about this last week. In 2001, you could buy a Murphy-bodied Duesenberg Roadster for $400,000, and we thought, oh, this is it. Model A's are gone. Duesenbergs are gone. What's next? Well, now Duesenbergs can bring $4 or $5 million at auction, and so we've continued that in a time when we thought maybe we won't be able to sustain that love for the pre-war cars, and it's sustained, albeit at a little lower scale, but a higher dollar valuation. Yep. So,
well, I was impressed that Limerock, we had a family that where two of their daughters, who were, I guess, probably late 20s, early 30s. Had bought and restored, I believe, in Oakland. Wow. And, they were really proud of what they had done. Right. They'd had a lot of help from their parents, I think. But, there are definitely people out there that recognize the value of these early automobiles, not only for their technical interest, but also for their simplicity. I mean, they're relatively easier to work on than something from the 80s or 90s. And the reward for that is something that's very tangible and something you can see and hear and feel. And I think that's the kind of thing, I think McPherson College getting whatever, $500 million endowment.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Because that's part of the issue is that, a gentleman I know in south of me is a well-known restorer in this area on pre-war cars. And, he is aging out, unfortunately. Right. And we need to create the backfill for those skill sets, because otherwise owning these vehicles becomes very difficult.
Yeah. And I think it's funny, Model A Fords, we always worry that they're going to sell or not sell, yet we sell them almost as soon as we get them. They don't last very long here. Model Ts are a little different story because even I have trouble with a Model T learning where the lime and the coconut go. And, it's, but the Model A's are amazing. I mean, people still have that desire for the rudimentary world of Model A's. I mean, it's like London to Brighton. Why is that still popular after all these years? It's the slowest race on the planet, right?
Oh, but I've done the last couple of years with Wayne, the Audrain veteran run, which is a facsimile at a smaller scale of a London to Brighton run in Newport. And I can't tell you what a blast that is, because you see, in the early days of the automobile, no one had any idea what they were doing. Right. I mean, you had electric cars that they thought that was the future. We had steam, we had gas, engine front, engine rear, water cooled, air cooled, and this whole universe of different solutions to self-motivated transport. And it's so much fun to see that. Sure. And again, you are seeing younger people coming into that and respecting those cars for their historical importance, which is really fun.
And the experience of driving a Model A is unlike, a modern car, but not just because of the obvious. I mean, the open air, the smell, the feel. It's like people love motorcycles. There's a more connection to the outside than there is the inside. But but like you said about having people like McPherson College and those that who's going to do the interior work, who's going to work on the shaping the metal, who's going to God, there's so many things. You got guys like Gene Winfield in the hot rod world who use an English wheel still. Is that going to be around, or does it need to be around? Are they going to be able to replace it with something, or is it 3D printing going to be something?
Well, I think because I have several Mercedes, I've worked with the Classic Center, which is an extraordinary resource that I'm just amazed at how they are able to leverage Mercedes history and keep so many. I mean, I can probably get 3/4 of the parts from my 60-year-old 230 SL without any trouble at all. I'm not cheap, of course, but they're there. But that they are increasingly looking at 3D printing as a way to come up with these low volume parts. So it won't solve every problem. And I think, people own cars that were made in that handcrafted way, want them to be repaired in that handcrafted way. I think there's something a little bit, I wouldn't call it cheating, but, that seems ungenuine if you have a fender that's, beaten out by a machine rather than by a skilled tradesman who knows how to use a ball peen hammer and an English wheel. And
if you're going to get your parts, you have to drag them through a field like at Carlisle or Hershey on a with a wagon, and otherwise you're just not it's not true to the thing. Well, what's interesting is we see a lot of these collections where a guy has a fill in the blank, a Duesenberg, a Packard, or whatever, and yet he's got almost a whole set of replacement everything for that car. So not only has he bought the 32 Packard Roadster, but he's bought every fender he could find, every spare tire, every wheel, every this, every that. And, thank goodness he did, because he probably didn't realize we were going to get to where we are now.
But what I love about the classic car world is you find these incredibly detailed experts, people who just do Bugatti Magnetos, or people that just, because I know this from my own experience, that restore these incredibly complicated fuel pumps on Pagodas. I mean, there may be only a few of them, but they are so rich in their knowledge, and they can tell just by looking at something, listening to it, is it working properly? Sure. And that's what I hope we can retain, is that incredibly detailed expertise that really makes it fun, is when you meet those type of people and they can say, Stewart, you've actually got the wrong tail lamp here. Right. This is the right one. And that's what makes this kind of fun, is you talked about Hershey. Part of it is the fun of finding that elusive part. I've been trying to find 2 French tail lamps for my 230 SL. And I got an email out of the blue after a wanted ad saying, "I've got your left-hand tail lamp." And it came in the original, Bosch box and everything. It's fun. Cool. There's a lot of fun in that, I think.
Well, I think it is too. And I think, it's like when you go to the Napa store and the young kid behind the counter says, "No, we don't have that." And then the old guy goes, "Get out of the way. We're going to go in the back here. We'll find that." And they come back and they have the part. And the knowledge base that guys like that have, I mean, is second to none. And I don't know how you pass that down. That's the problem, is that you have to have an apprentice that just basically shadows you for, however many years until you're long gone, and then hopefully they retained enough of what you taught them to continue the process.
Well, thank heaven for the internet and for YouTube.
Yeah.
I might watch 4 YouTube videos before I try to tackle one project.
Sure,
but
why not?
It does give you the confidence to try something, even if you might screw it up, which I have done on more than one occasion. But it is fun to try to use that tutelage to try to do something on your own that you would not had that not been there, you probably wouldn't have tried it.
Yeah, I'm a gearhead, but I'm not a mechanical gearhead. I don't know really. I've never restored a car completely. I know a lot about it. I could probably dive in and figure out some of it, but having that crutch to be able to go to YouTube and not have to go to the library and pull out a dusty volume of something to figure it out, having that YouTube thing is amazing because the amount of knowledge of things that I rely on for YouTube is frightening. Like tying a bow tie to go to the black tie the other night. It's like I hadn't tied one in a while. I was like, what do you do? How do you put this over?
Wait a minute, sir, it's going to be backwards. So it'll be very
That's the worst part too. Yeah. So my wife just ties it for me. So that's but the other thing that you've done that I really love, because it's one of my favorite magazines, is you're a contributor to Sports Car Market magazine, which to me is still the greatest magazine ever invented in the history of ever. It's an amazing publication that Keith Martin has done an amazing job of getting it past all the humps that publishing a magazine has.
Yep.
And of course,
Keith is a delight to work with, and the staff is terrific. And what I love about it is that I'd say probably 3/4 of what I do are things that just sort of fall out of heaven. Right. And whether it's an Intermechanica Italia I wrote about, or a Cadillac Eldorado Brougham. What I really enjoy is, again, reaching out to those experts. There's a guy who just restores the electronic box. The Eldorado Brougham was basically a concept car in serial production.
Right.
It was not a normal production car by any means. And so a lot of its components were fabricated. And what I love about the stuff that I do is I think about the person who's going to buy one of these. What are those hacks you need to know about and watch for, whether it's the air suspension or the electronic, the electrical controls. And that's what I get to do, in 800 words, which is, really a lot of fun. And then seeing what sells in the market and what doesn't.
That's the crazy part of it. And of course, the one thing I miss is the old school part of it, which was the paintings that used to be the cover for Sports Car Market back in the day that were so fantastic. Of course, all the powers that be told Keith that if you're going to be on newsstands, you got to have a photograph, and it's got to be this and this many words and yada, yada, yada. And, it is what it is, but I still miss it. But I love the publication because back, when I first started reading Sports Car Market was just kind of the early stages of really the internet and things being available out there. Most of your information came from something like Sports Car Market magazine.
Absolutely. Or Hemmings.
Yeah. And Hemmings, talk about an anomaly. Amazing thing that still survives is Hemmings, which still is that thick.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and it still gets on your fingers, and you go, dadgummit, I should put gloves on before I wore them. And it's funny too, because Hemmings online for us in the classic car sales business is still one of our best sources for leads and buyers on classic cars.
Really? That's great to know that. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was surprising. It was one of those things that you think that can't possibly, there's no way that that's possible. But it turns out that it's so. So, but of course you were involved in another magazine. That a magazine was maybe a misnomer, a hardbound 4 times a year magazine called Automobile Quarterly.
Yeah, it was my first job out of college, and I happened to form a relationship with the publisher, Scott Bailey, who really became a very close friend throughout his life. And you worked with some really interesting and occasionally crazy people who were people like Griff Borgeson, who would just research these things to the ends of the earth, and all of this before the internet. So. And honestly, in the early days, until we had a fax machine and then a Wang computer, was all done on IBM Selectrics and over the mail.
Right.
And, we would get stuff from Europe and from Griff in France. And, the level of research that he would do all just by his individual contacts I really don't think anybody has ever duplicated that.
Sure.
And it was an honor to work with both the photographers as well as the writers. And, I still have a complete set.
Sure.
It's a great resource.
Absolutely, because there are, not everything is on the internet. People think that everything is out there, and it's not. There is a lot of things that are still not there. I mean, the box gets narrower and narrower every year, or every day, for that matter. It's interesting though that a publication like Automobile Quarterly had things back before we thought about these things. Like they would go to a collector's garage, like a guy who was known in the hobby, and you would never see that anywhere. And now, of course, you see, everybody's collection. Well, let's say everybody's. You don't. There's still a lot of them out there that are hidden.
Well, I think one of the things that I think is just unimaginable today is that, Scott Bailey commissioned Bertone to body a Mustang. And for the New York Auto Show. I mean, I worked closely with Bertone when I was at Opel, and it was a somewhat different company then than it was in the mid 60s. But the idea of shipping them a Mustang, which they stripped down and rebodied, and then Giugiaro styled the car, and then brought it to the New York Auto Show, sponsored by or endorsed by Automobile Quarterly, it just would never happen today.
Yeah. I mean, they have a hard time getting traditional manufacturers at auto shows. We're doing the Philly Auto Show right now, and there's a few that are noticeably absent. And we do classic cars there because it's becoming almost as much of a draw to the shows as it is as the new cars are. Because you can see the new cars. It's not like the old days when they had, brown paper on the windows of the dealership, and you couldn't see in until the day they wanted you to see it, right?
No, the Detroit show, which has gone back to, this painful time of the year for Detroit because of the weather, is a shadow of its former self. And, the New York Auto Show, likewise, there used to be a source of major introductions, like, Bob Lutz driving a Jeep through the front window.
Right.
But, all of that's been replaced by social media and targeted introductions. And, I think most of the high-end manufacturers, most of the premium manufacturers are only represented by dealers at the Detroit show.
Right. Well, I remember I went in 2004 with Jerry Durnell, who became the publisher of Automobile Quarterly in its final iteration. And 2004 was a great year to go to the Detroit Auto Show. We went on Media Day, and I think Ford had spent $30 million on their display back then. And Ferrari, I remember, had glass stairs up to a second level that was a glass floor and food and drink, and it was regaled. You were regaled if you were media, and I can't imagine Ford spends $3 million now on the Detroit Auto Show.
No, and I think often that stuff is being now delegated to dealers, so they just show their current models. There are fewer and fewer concept cars being developed for the auto show circuit. One of the shows that I particularly enjoyed when I lived in Germany was going to Geneva, which was a small show, but very sophisticated in terms of the cars that were launched there, and also the relationship to what were the remaining Italian coach builders, be it Bertone or Pininfarina.
Sure.
They would build cars specifically for those types of shows and launch them there. And you would see things that were in those days wild, that's now only happening at venues like Pebble Beach, unfortunately.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and Pebble Beach is still the granddaddy of them all in Concours world, although where you and I met is a fantastic one. The Radnor Hunt Concours is an amazing event. And your event that you put on up in Limerock is quite the event as well, too. I want to try to make it up this year. I'm anxious
Well, please do, and please let us know.
Yeah.
It's really the only event of its kind in the country where we have historic racing bracketing a Sunday concours. So, the team that has taken over Limerock has really, focused on trying to leverage this incredible facility. And it's 300 plus acres of beautiful Northwest Connecticut countryside, and having the track at our disposal on Sunday when we have as many as 1,000 cars there.
Wow.
Is something that really nobody else can duplicate. So we're always trying to find ways to leverage that, take advantage of it, exploit it. And so we're looking forward to what's coming up this year.
And it's an interesting track because it's not the longest track, but it's got some interesting features that have never gone away since day one. Off-camber turns and things that they made sure that when they redid the track that didn't go away.
Yep. Well, I remember when I was first at AQ going to a GTP race at Limerock, and these are like not Porsche 962s. I mean, these are big, wide, powerful cars on a 1.5 mile track. And
Right.
it's, there are not many places to pass. It's very challenging driving.
Sure.
But it's a great course.
Sure. And the Concours that you do there is, gaining traction every year, as they all do. But gosh, there's a lot of competition out there. I mean, every time we turn around, there seems like we're over Concoursed. And it's not as easy as people think it is. It's like the collector car auction business. People think, well, that looks pretty simple. You just get a bunch of people to bring their cars, and we'll look at them and tell you which one we think is the prettiest. Well, it's not quite that simple.
No, it is not at all. And you're right, there is more competition, but there's also people are realizing that's a lot harder than, as you point out, it's a lot harder than you think it is.
Right.
And, and it's interesting, there are other actors coming in that are disruptors. And one of them is, for example, Bring a Trailer. So
Right.
Bring a Trailer has had their alumni events around the country, and they had one in Westchester in the fall, and it was extremely well attended. And, think about that accumulation of eyeballs, owners. I bought several cars on Bring a Trailer, and I got a note the other day saying, "Hey, are you interested in selling your SLK 230?" I'm like,
Right.
"Well, maybe so." And so think about, I don't know how many cars they're selling a day. Let's call it 50 cars a day. I mean, the compounding effect of that audience
Right.
is an extremely powerful resource.
Well, and when they do events, people have to make choices on how many events, what events they're going to go to. Most of our wives are like, if you tell me there's one more car event on your calendar, I'm going to strangle you. But there's a local Cars and Coffee here, mainline Cars and Coffee. They got 1,000 cars on Sunday. You think, okay, well, you're not watching Formula One, or you're not going to the Formula One race if you're doing that. You're not going to the Philly Auto Show if you're doing that. I mean, the capturing people's time and getting people to commit to doing something is always the most difficult part of any of these things, because they're getting bombarded, and especially if it's a well-known car that's from a collector who's accessible.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I think also people are very conscious of the costs involved. So you think about, someone who's coming from, your part of the world up here, if they're paying a transport company, that's probably what, $2,500, $3,000
all day long. Yeah.
They got to get the car ready. They've got to bring somebody along. They've got to get a hotel room. And, this is like a $5,000 to $8,000 exercise.
And there's no prize money. So
no, there's no prize money. And at least fortunately, we don't pay people to come.
Right.
I'm always amazed by Concours that say, we want you to spend $5,000 bringing your car. And by the way, pay us $250.
Right.
I mean, if it's a charity, I get that. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
The events are for charitable benefit. And the way that Amelia Island was for spina bifida, I get that.
Yeah.
But I just think that people are getting, I think, tired is the wrong word, but are more conscious now of those costs. And that's definitely a challenge for events like ours.
Yeah, I think, and that goes not just for the participants, but for judges, for everybody. I mean, everybody's coming out of pocket on these things. It reminds me of the old offshore powerboat days when the guy would spend $1 million on a boat and when, $5,000 was the top prize money.
Yep, exactly.
You don't get that. So, and of course, now there's a celebrity element with all these concours that are trying to get the celebrities. Chattanooga has done as good a job probably as anybody getting people like your friend Wayne Carini and Ray Evernham and Linda Vaughn and Keith Martin and all these automotive celebrities, if you will. But we sure miss your buddy Wayne's show, Chasing Classic Cars. I know that there's a version on YouTube now that's similar.
Yep, we're doing stuff on YouTube right now, but as some of you may know, some viewers may know, Wayne's involved with Speed Vision, which has been restarted. And there's a lot of activity going on behind the scenes with that. So, Wayne has, I do Wayne's social media for him, with him. And, there's such a strong following out there with all of us who have watched those shows. And, going back to the YouTube example, there's sort of and I get the same thing from Mike Brewer's show, which is, well, if they can do it, why can't I? So I don't mean necessarily buying a car, restoring it, selling it, making money. That's a little more complicated.
Sure.
But, the idea of taking, saying I'm going to try to do this job myself rather than farming it out. I think that's been one of the, the overall awareness of classic cars, their history, their importance, and the story. I think what really appeals to Wayne and I really feel the same way, is the story. We had a column called "Every Car Has a Story," and some of the cars have extraordinary stories, like this Studebaker he had that had, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 miles and had lived in a garage, by the original owner since it was new. And he continues to, there are obviously fewer of those stories out there, but they're still there.
Yeah. Well, I tried to figure out a way that we could tap into his phone line and get the call before it gets to him, so we could say, Wayne Carini's garage. Yeah, we'll come look at that $1 million Bugatti in your garage. I mean, the phone calls he gets is like, we wish we could get those calls. Yeah. But he has built a thing that is anti every other car show out there, because most of the car shows are deadline builds that have to be done in 30 minutes or less, and if you don't get them done then all hell's going to break loose, and his was the opposite of that. And the other cool thing is that he talked about the process, but it wasn't about how much money was made on the sale of the car. I bought it for 10 and sold it for 20. That didn't ever come up. And I know a lot of people say, I want to know what the price was, but you don't have to know the price to know the process.
Yeah. Well, and also when you're restoring a car, I mean, the amount of money you put into it is often very hard to calculate. Right. So, and you have a lot of surprises along the way too. That, I know that on one of the cars he was working on, that a pair of and it was a very rare car, that a pair of the manifolds cracked, and he had to go and replace them. And whenever you're doing these types of projects, you're always going to have surprises.
Sure. Well, and at the end of the day, a lot of guys will say, well, I don't count that as part of the expense of what, total cost in the car. And it's like, okay, but you've shipped it across the country 4 times to different places, and, that's $5,000. And before you start adding that up, and I guess, whatever's in people's minds is, but there's going to be a whole lot of collections coming on the market here in the next 2 decades. I mean, that's the scary part for me, is what happens when all these well-known collections, like the Mullen collection that sold within 24 hours of, it was amazing how fast that went. What do you think is going to happen when all that hits? What's going to be the change in the market?
Well, I think a lot of it also depends on where the economy is headed. And if, indeed the trend line continues. I think there was a lot of anxiety before the election. Sure. That seems to have been now resolved. And I think a lot of it will depend on where the economy is heading. Can the market absorb? There are only so many people that have the resources to afford those types of cars. One auction that I'm watching particularly closely is the IMS Museum.
My God!
Which is auctioning off, some extraordinary car.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And the Mercedes is expected to, to set a new record. The 250 LM certainly will be up there. So, whether the market can absorb all of those vehicles is a very interesting question.
Yeah, there's a lot of wealth out there. Certainly.
Yeah, there's a lot of wealth.
And the 917 Porsche coming up this weekend at Mecum and the 910 Porsche are both going to be interesting barometers to see what they do. And we had Brian Redmond on, and he said, you don't want to know what I bought it and sold it for back in the day, $15,000 and $50,000. He thought, woohoo, he's doing a little jig, So. But then, and you would know this better than I, but I mean, what happens to sort of the second and third tier cars that come out of those collections? Right. So, we talked about the baby birds and, that they've been trending downward for a while, but, what happens to, Studebakers or even like 50s Packards? Do those then plummet even further as the market gets 50s,
as more of them become available?
Yeah, 50s Packards are almost impossible to give away. I mean, they're just they're very difficult. And you used to do or still do a feature called buy, sell, hold, which we could have fun with today. Have you got a buy, sell, and hold on your list? All right, let me hear it.
My buy is early Mustang fastbacks. I think I referred to them recently in an article as a GT350 adjacent product, especially a K-code model.
Sure.
When you see one, the styling has really stayed fresh. Less so the hardtop, obviously, but and I think when you have those cars, people aren't, even if you could get a Marty report, which you can't for an early Mustang, but nobody's come up to you the way they might on a Corvette and say, well, they didn't have these wheels, or they didn't have this interior.
Right.
So you can take a plain Jane fastback and amp it up, and you can make it a resto mod. You can restore it. You can claim it's all numbers matching, but there's there's a whole continuum of ways and to enjoy these cars. So just have it a daily driver. And I think you can also make them into great touring cars, 5 speeds, better wheels and tires, improve the suspension. So I think that's definitely a buy. And my sell was, the last generation Mercedes 107, the 560 SL. I think, there seems to be one on Bring a Trailer every other day with
low miles.
miles.
Exactly. I've got one with 11,000 miles here.
Yeah, exactly. And they're just not fun to drive. I have a Pagoda, and maybe I'm jealous, but I just don't. I mean, apart from a powerful engine, I don't find them fun cars to drive.
Yeah, and they were kind of the poster child for success in the United States of America back in the day. A Rolex watch, a Mercedes SL, and a Learjet, and you've made it, right? So what's your hold? What's your hold?
My hold is a more personal, and that's the NSX. And
love that car.
I look at that car and think in 1990. How far out this car was with all aluminum body when no one was making aluminum production bodies and variable valve timing and, a chassis that was, race bred. And I really think that there was a bit of a bubble last year.
Sure.
I think it tapped down a little bit. But that would be my 3.
So
and yours?
Mine are the buy is the AMX. We are seeing a real appreciation of AMXs, which I didn't really even know much about when I was in the car world back in the day. When I was 16 thinking about cars, an AMX wasn't even on my radar. Yep. The hold for me is just, I want to hold them because I hope they go flat as the 3-pedal Ferraris, because I really want a 3-pedal 575 Maranello or a 3-pedal 599 GTB, but if the longer I wait, the more out of reach it gets. And my sell is the Baby Thunderbirds, which is a ship/sailed probably thing that's been going on for a while. But we're really the market for those that used to be $50,000. We're lucky to get mid-20s for now, and it's a shame. Of course, my haha moment buy, sell, hold. Buy the Bricklin. Hold the 917 Porsche until Saturday, January the 18th, and sell the Bugatti Royale. So
I grew up near a dealer that sold Bricklins, and it's such a crazy story.
It really is. It makes DeLorean look tame. They should have made the movie about Bricklin.
Well, and the government in that part of Canada was basically thrown out because of all the subsidies they gave them. And
you mean the 51st?
The dealer said that during the cold weather, the plastic would bend up, and the cars within the rain would come in. And they actually got it done.
Yeah, when you say Canada, you mean the 51st state? Is that what you said?
Yeah, exactly.
So, speaking of states, we got to give a shout out to all our friends out in California. My goodness, the horror of what's going on with those wildfires, and then forget all the everything, houses and daily drivers, but collections of art and cars, and just the loss is just going to be so substantial, and it will do no good for anybody because it's just horrible. And I don't know if there's a way to fix it, but I sure hope they find out a way to do so.
What I think is so difficult is 2 things. One is the scale of the devastation. And someone referred to flying over Altadena and thinking, this looks like, Germany, in 1945.
Or Hiroshima, yeah.
And then the fact that people are they don't know where to start. They don't know where to begin.
Right.
And I think, it's going to be a very difficult road home. And I certainly have contributed to charities there, and I would encourage people to do that.
Absolutely.
Because, a lot of these people, their whole life, their lives were tied up in these houses, and they have nothing.
Most of the people that live in those houses couldn't afford to buy them today because when they bought them, they were $150,000 ranchers, and now they're $1.5 million or more. Right. And now, and forget about that, because now all of a sudden the building codes are going to change. They're going to have to build these things not just for earthquakes, which were wood, instead of stone. Now they're going to have to figure out whatever the in-between is on that. And so I'm with you. Donate all you can, when you can, for any of these things. And don't forget about the people from North Carolina either, too. They're still in a world of hurt over there as well, too. So
absolutely.
Yeah, Lowell, such a great time having you on the show today. We really appreciate it. And glad we finally got to connect. And we will see you probably at an event soon, and hopefully at your event up in Limerock.
Great. Well, please come. You'll be my guest.
Thanks so much.
The Classic Auto Mall has more than 1,000 vehicles for consignment in our huge 8-acre climate-controlled showroom. It's a real indoor mall. If you'd like to know all the advantages of buying and selling a car through consignment, the information is available on our website, or you can talk to a classic car specialist who can answer all your questions. It's easy, safe, convenient, and it doesn't matter where you are. We sell worldwide. See our huge selection of classic and collectible vehicles at classicautomall.com.
And we're back with the Classic Auto Mall show from the Classic Auto Mall studio in Morgantown, Pennsylvania. We saw Alyssa, our spokesperson, on Channel 6 doing the traffic the other day.
Yeah.
We were on our way to the Philly Auto Show, black tie, and Kathy goes, "There's Alyssa. She's our spokesperson."
Yeah.
We haven't seen her in a while. She's been too busy.
She's
I
working.
don't blame her. She got actually a paying gig.
How about that?
Yeah, so good for her. Lowell, great wealth of information. My goodness, again, 14 pages of notes, and I got to 1.5 of them. So great to have an insight of a guy who's worked in different facets of the car world, whether it be the manufacturer, whether it be Concours area. I noticed that we end up getting a whole lot of race car drivers on here, which is great. We love, but there's also lots more to talk about as well too in the world.
No, he's well connected.
Yes, very well connected.
It was really interesting. And my first wife had it was a 75 Opel. It was a Cadet, I think.
Opel
It was
Cadet.
like
We just had one just not.
It was like a two-door sedan, and it was had really nice design.
Right.
Good looking car.
We had an Opel Cadet that was here. It may still be.
Yeah, the brown one's still here.
Is it still here? And of course, the Opel GT, the little baby Corvette.
That was I always loved those.
Yeah, those were they called the baby Corvette.
Yep.
So some of our new inventory in. We'll go through this pretty quickly because we went long, but that's okay. We had good things to talk about. How about the 1960 Mercedes 190 SL Roadster in light blue over dark blue? And I tell you, the color combination on this car is what makes this car. They're not the most powerful Mercedes ever made. They're fun touring and driving cars, but they're not hot rods like a 300 SL is. But man, oh man, this blue over dark blue is stunning. Beautiful restoration, 1.9 liter single overhead cam 4-cylinder, 4-speed manual, soft top and the hard top, both tops. A beautiful leather interior. Other new arrival, how about the 1971 Ford Ranchero GT? That's polar opposite of what we just talked about.
Sure.
Light pewter metallic over black, which is a great color for that car, by the way.
Yep.
That light pewter just works well if you're a Ranchero guy. Numbers matching 351 cubic inch Cleveland V8, correct C4 automatic, one of 1,400 built in this GT configuration. Great driver, clean interior, just a great kind of a multi-purpose car, as we were talking about SUVs are nowadays. Other new arrival, the 1957 Oldsmobile Super 88 Holiday Coupe. Have you seen this? Festival red and Alcan white over black. Ooh. This is an interesting car. Yeah.
That's right.
It's got a 455 horsepower, 383 cubic inch stroker in it.
Wow.
Which is such an odd thing to put in that car. Right. Built turbo hydromatic 400 vintage heat and air, nut and bolt restoration, Willwood front brakes. I mean, and the original transmission and engine are included.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to go back to
good deal.
But I think if you drive it one time with this 383 stroker, you're going to be hard pressed to want to.
For show and go.
Yeah, I think you're very hard pressed to say, oh, let's put back 283 or whatever it would have been in it back in the probably a 328 or something weird. Pontiac or Oldsmobile had some odd engine configurations. Other new arrival, how about the 1963 Jeep Willys station wagon?
Yeah, I'm looking at it. Very cool.
Parkway green and champagne over tan.
That's my vibe.
That's your vibe? That's your thing?
Yeah, I like the old SUVs.
Yeah, I do too. It's very, very cool. 230 cubic inch single overhead cam inline 6, 3-speed manual tranny, Dana axles. It's rust free. It's just a cool car. Or station wagon, or SUV, or ute.
Classic.
Excuse me. Other new arrival, the 41 Packard 120 Series 1901 convertible coupe. My goodness, that's a mouthful. Laguna maroon over black.
Yes.
282 cubic inch inline 8. Rebuilt 3-speed manual, new brakes, new front suspension. Drive it or restore it. It's either way. I mean, it's kind of... It's a driver quality now, but at some point in time, it'll need to be restored. But you could drive it for a while.
I mean, if this thing showed up at a car show, I'm going over, no matter what the condition is.
It doesn't matter what the condition is.
It's beautiful.
You're going to love it, and you're going to compliment the owner on it, even if it's not. He hadn't done a thing to it. Yeah. But at some point in time, somebody might want to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to take this to the next level."
Right. Exactly.
So good for them. And last but not least, the 2017 Ford Mustang GT Coupe. ruby red metallic over black. That ruby red is a really good color. It's that dark red. 24,000 actual miles, garage kept. Got the Recaro seat package, 5-liter Coyote V8, a 6-speed manual training. And showroom new. Cha-ching.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. So,
nice car.
Anything else happening in the car world? You're getting caught up on descriptions, I see.
Yeah, we're good. Everything's good. And
we got a little behind, folks.
Yeah, but now we have some interesting stuff in the queue. So be sure to check out the website, classicautomall.com. Yeah. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and all the rest.
Yeah, our YouTube subscribers has gone way up. So please go not only watch our videos on YouTube, but subscribe to them, because every little bit helps, and every comment you make, good, bad, or ugly, is helpful. And try not to be too ugly.
Make a comment. That's great.
Yeah, we're okay with it. And listen, if we get something wrong, we're okay with that.
You know, Gianni Russo once said, doesn't matter what they say about you as long as they're talking about you. Right. But we're okay if we make a mistake. We want to know about it. Please send us an email, send us a note or something that says, hey, you know what? I noticed that you had this, and it's not a 307, it's a 309, or okay with that. We're not going to get our feelings hurt. Right. We're going to thank you. We do thousands of cars every year. We're going to get something wrong every once in a while.
Sure. Or podcast at classicautomall.com.
Yeah. And if you got any questions or if you got any ideas for guests for the show, give us a call or email us or reach out to us in any way possible.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we'll get that and see it. And if it's somebody that we can make happen, we'll certainly make happen. Now, if you tell us to get Jay Leno, send us his phone number when you send us the request. So we'll know how to get him.
And this probably will air after the Philly Auto Show. So if you came by our booth and visited us, thank you for stopping by and come by the mall.
Yeah, we've got 12 cars down at the Philly Auto Show down there. The turnout on Saturday, the second day or the first day that they were open to the public. We went to the Friday night Black Tie Gala, which was packed. I don't remember seeing as many people there as I saw there. And then Saturday, they said they had record crowds as well.
Very good.
So, but it's a little slower during the week. So if you want to go at a time when it's not quite as crowded, you know, if you can go Monday through Friday, there's usually less crowds and you get more opportunity to see cars. You go there on a busy Saturday, it's wall to
shoulder to shoulder.
But the amount of cars they have, the customs and the hot rods and the classics that the AACA bring and we bring and other dealers bring and the custom alley is really spectacular.
Between AACA and Classic Auto Mall, that's a show in itself.
That's a show in itself. That's probably really cool 35 to 40 cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lowell mentioned how the Detroit Auto Show is kind of a shadow of itself. Yeah. Philly is booming. It's one of the largest.
It's been part of the culture, I think, for a long, long time. And I think for some reason it has survived a lot of things that other shows have not been able to survive.
And they've adapted with that, with the tuner area.
The tuner area with us bringing classics and all that. But as we talked about with him, you know, the Concours d'Elegance says, I love that they have classes for the kids, but don't get away from the pre-war stuff. Don't get away from the 60s Ferraris. Don't get away from the stuff that brought you.
Sure.
Because I'd much rather educate them while letting them have their classes than to just completely do away with it and make it a Radwood. And Radwood is Radwood.
100%.
You know, so.
Yep, you're right.
So next week on the show, we'll have another exciting guest. And if you hadn't caught us on YouTube, you can catch us on all the podcast sites, iHeartRadio and
all the rest. All the major ones. Buzzsprout.
We'll see you next week on the Classic Auto Mall Show.
You've been listening to the Classic Auto Mall Show with your host, Stewart Howden. Executive producer, Steve Safier. Produced and engineered by yours truly, J.R. Russ. Available on classicautomall.com, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Music courtesy of the Pat Travers Band. For tour dates, contact, and stuff, visit pattravers.com. Produced by Car Smarts Media. Copyright all rights reserved.